Bonjour, bienvenue au French Tech Podcast. Welcome to the French Tech Podcast, recording here at the Asia Startup Summit, co-organized by the French Chamber of Commerce and La French Tech Singapore. Very happy to welcome Pascal, founder and CEO of Chekk. Welcome, Pascal.
Thank you.
Could I ask you to quickly introduce yourself and your company?
Of course. So I'm Pascal Nizri. I spent 20 years as a managing director working for a big bank, HSBC, around the world in many countries, in various kind of senior positions. But it gave me a good first-hand view into a big problem that financial institutions are faced with when it comes to KYC, knowing their customers to prevent money laundering, terrorist financing, and all that kind of jazz. And so this is why I created Chekk, which is providing end-to-end secure know your customers solutions, removing the pain and cost of interactions between financial institutions and their retail and corporate customers.
And that pain and cost is real, right? I mean, you've experienced it firsthand working for a bank. Could you tell us a little bit about that friction?
Of course. So yeah, I've seen it firsthand exactly. You know, as a chief of staff of a retail bank worldwide, or head of retail or head of business banking in various countries, you do feel it a lot. I've personally managed remediation exercises where we were unfortunately having to block or close accounts because customers couldn't refresh and provide information. It is a real pain. It's a huge pain. It's a lot of cost. It's for the good reason, and again, it's to prevent money laundering, terrorist financing, tax evasion, sanction evasion, all of that.
Of course.
So it's things that are very close to our heart, and we need to really make sure that are prevented. But the problem is that very often it is a very complex process, a very siloed approach in banks between retail and corporate. You know, if you open your retail account and then you're asked to open a business account with the same bank because you're a director of a business banking with them, usually they start from scratch. You have an account in Singapore and then you go to Hong Kong to open an account. Usually they start from scratch because of cross-border data limitation, you know, from a regulatory perspective. So there's a lot of limitations from a regulation perspective, also from their own kind of internal system, usually in banks and others. And it's a very, very difficult thing. So it leads to a lot of friction, a lot of cost, a lot of long time, you know, turnaround time to serve a customer is very long. And that's what we help with. In our systems, we reduce the cost drastically of KYC and beyond because we propose more than KYC activities. We reduce the turnaround time drastically. We help to comply with both KYC type rules, but also data protection type rules like GDPR and others. And for the customer themselves, it's a great way to improve customer experience, but also they own the data, so they can use and reuse, and that's very important.
What you just mentioned, improving that customer experience, I think that's really where the heart of the battle is these days, right?
Yes, a lot. Actually, the way we summarize things usually is that we see financial institutions in kind of 4 different stages of maturity. One, they're very focused on complying, so it's about ticking the box, making sure, okay, we comply with all regulation, we can stay in business. Then after that, they mature a bit more and they say, wow, this is good, but it costs us a lot of money, actually. So then it's about how can we streamline and reduce the cost there. And then they realize, okay, it's a bit better, but the customer experience is horrible now. Customers are leaving. So then they try and do a lot of work around that. And when they're even more mature than that, then they realize that actually all of that can lead to new business models and monetization, but all of that compliant way. And then they move to that. And those 4 stages, I think that Chekk can support with the various type of solution we have, which are KYC, but not only, with onboarding, verification, and the broader interactions with the customer lifecycle management with retail and corporate customers.
Well, I think it's very interesting. I obviously see this kind of startup, right? Anything that can help banks make the customer experience better is very welcome, I think. But to see it coming from someone who has been on the inside of the system, who's been able to identify these problems, and who has identified the fact that maybe a startup would be better positioned to serve these needs.
So obviously big banks can also help, but for me, the ideas I had and the way I wanted to do it worked pretty well in the format of a startup. But actually, I started Chekk in parallel of my duties in the bank. So it's I was a managing director in that big bank, and I had this idea and things I wanted to do, and I created Chekk a few years ago in parallel of that. And I was very fortunate that the bank is a great bank and is supporting me in doing that, which is pretty rare, not only in that bank, but also in any bank. So it was all supported and signed and all. They actually regularly featured me in article internally, you know, how being an entrepreneur makes me a better entrepreneur, those kind of things. And they've been very good people and supportive. So, and now I've transitioned full-time to it, actually, earlier this year, to this business, which is growing, because it is growing quite a lot. We have a lot of demand. We have great customers, like the BPI in France, using us. That's a French state-owned investment bank, using us for corporate KYC. The team is growing. We're doing another fundraising. So there's a lot going on,
So also doing business in France. We're here recording here in Singapore, Southeast Asia.
Yes.
Could you quickly speak to some of the opportunities here?
Yes, of course. So initially, we are a Hong Kong company to start with, so from Asia, and then with a subsidiary in Paris, where we have customers in Europe and Asia, and we support those from those two places. And in Paris, we are in the village by Crédit Agricole, with whom we were this week actually in the Singapore FinTech Festival.
Oh, fantastic!
It was a fantastic, great, huge booth right in the middle of it, with a lot of interest and support. It was great, as well as with the French Chamber of Commerce, so a packed agenda. But obviously, Asia is an important region for us, and not only Hong Kong, where we are initially based, but actually also Singapore and Southeast Asia. So there's a lot of activity going on for us right now in Singapore. We have a strategic alliance with a big 4 consultancy firm going on, and we also have a lot of interaction with regulators, giving big projects underway right now, which I'm not at liberty to go into details of, but quite exciting stuff. And also there's a lot of demand we see from Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia. I myself lived a few years before in Indonesia. Saya bicara sedikit bahasa Indonesia. And so we do a lot of interaction with various regulators and customers and prospects in those geographies.
Fantastic. Well, that's really great to hear. Thank you very much, Pascal, for taking the time to talk
to
us today.
Thank you very much.
Enjoy the rest of the event here
today.
Thank you.
Thank you.